habeas corpus. It's out of
Congressman,
control.
you broke with the Democratic delegation in New Jersey. You were the only Democrat to do so in voting for the Laken Riley Act, which would allow folks, immigrants who are accused of low-level offenses and violent crimes, but accused of, not found guilty of, to be detained and potentially deported. How does that make New Jersey safer?
Sure, no, one has nothing to do with the other.
Of course.
Let me finish. Laken Riley Act, what it says is if you are a violent criminal and you go to someone's house at night with a gun, break into their house, if you're a violent criminal, you shouldn't be in the United States and you shouldn't be in New Jersey, and I feel that way. However, what Donald Trump is doing, he's rounding up innocent, undocumented people, and I've said this from the beginning. What makes New Jersey safer is you stand there and you say as governor, you say, I don't think so, Trump. You're not coming in here and rounding up innocent, undocumented people at restaurants, at schools, at churches, and you make it very clear that's the line.
Does the Laken Riley Act not allow federal
immigration? The Laken Riley Act allows due process.
Agents.
They're totally two different things. And by the way, if you're a violent criminal,
to round up innocent people who have been accused of a low-level offense but not found guilty of.
I've been happy to support that, Mayor. I supported her letter.
After 16 months of war between Israel and Hamas, 5 Americans are still being held hostage in Gaza, but only one of them is still alive. Israeli-American and Tenafly native Idan Alexander, who was taken captive on October 7, 2023, as a member of the Israeli military at just 19 years old. Now, at 21, the Tenafly High School graduate is at the center of negotiations between U.S. and Middle East officials over the next phase of the ceasefire deal. Congressman Josh Gottheimer has been among the most vocal federal leaders demanding the release of all hostages and, in particular, Idan, whose family are his constituents. Gottheimer just returned from an unannounced trip to Qatar, where he had one primary goal, bringing Idan Alexander home. The congressman and Idan's father, Adi Alexander, join me now for the latest. Congressman Adi, thank you both for your time today. Adi, I want to start with you. Given how fragile this next phase of the ceasefire deal appears to be, how hopeful are you that Idan will be among the hostages released?
I mean, it's really fragile, and the deal never was perfect, the way it was constructed, moving from the first phase to the second. But we have to remain hopeful. The hope is mandatory. And it's really up to our new team, our new negotiating team, to reshuffle the cards and get this negotiations for the second phase started.
What's your take on how these negotiations are going? I mean, your family, of course, has, if I can take the liberty to say, has become an emblem of that hope and strength. This, of course, is a deal that was put out there, many, many months ago that we're now seeing play out. I mean, what's your take on how this is going and how Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has handled it?
Just to be exact, this deal was put together back in December of 2023. So we're talking about more than a year ago. Now, in regards of the President Netanyahu, really right now, our only urge to him and the only message that we would like to convey is to maybe to extend the first phase, get as many as possible people out. I would say that let's get everybody out in one shot, okay, all for all, and just let's end this war.
What was your reaction then, Adi, this weekend when we learned that Israel would hold those 600 Palestinian prisoners, given the nature of how the hostages were released? What was your reaction to what that might do to the future of Idan being brought back home?
It's really, I was disturbed at once, but from my understanding, the negotiation is about releasing those prisoners for the remaining 4 bodies of the hostages are in process. Hopefully, we will see in the coming days this release being executed. And I'm hopeful that we're not on the verge of sabotaging the deal and collapsing this deal again.
Let me bring in Republican Budget Officer Declan O'Scanlan, who's with me now. Senator, thank you. I know it's a little tricky with this going on in the background, but we want to get you, so I know you all have a response that you're going to be delivering soon. Takeaways, $58 billion budget. You're a fiscal hawk. Stand out.
This is where it starts. It won't end here. Just like all previous budgets, some of the things that he claimed to have cut, like the pork that was all over last year's budget, will be built back in. This budget, mark my words, when all is said and done, it's very likely this budget will be closer to $60 billion than 58. And look,
and you all, Republicans in your caucus, have threatened to sue the governor if, in fact, items that are not appropriated toward direct state
if they are go against
agencies.
the Constitution, which provides that if you're going to dole out money, the gross income tax, for instance, has to be given out based on a sound formula. Last year, there were dozens of line items that didn't do that, hundreds of millions of dollars. We will sue if it comes to that. And it's a practice that this administration has started against all practices of administrations before them. This is the very first one to do that.
All right. I saw you writing down some items during the speech when the governor was calling on, his critics to find other areas to cut. What would you cut? You said that this was a disaster waiting to happen.
This is a challenge
disaster
that Republicans have met every single cycle. We've come up with hundreds of line items that we would cut. We've come up with dozens of reforms that would provide billions in relief and spending relief. We're all over that. That is just a lame challenge that suggests, he goes on to suggest that you would have to cut pension payments. You would have to cut transit.
Would you not?
No, you can't cut pension payments. But there's tons of pork in these budgets. I would cut luxury stadiums that are funded with our tax dollars with no competitive process, with no formula.
You're talking about the one in Middlesex County, about $120 million.
There's, again, I can find $1 billion in this budget that we could cut in the final budget last year and in this budget when it's finally done this year, and it's not hard to do.
A lot has been made about the surplus that this governor has focused on. The uncertainty, of course, in what dollars we will get, what dollars we won't get from the federal government. As far as being a good fiscal steward, is that not a good idea to have
it's great to have a surplus, but it's better to have a balanced budget. So if you're better off having a $5 billion surplus and a balanced budget than a $10 billion surplus and an unbalanced budget. This budget is unbalanced between $3 and $4 billion, which is tragic given the amazing fiscal times and the huge billions of dollars of federal money, close to $20 billion of the past 7 years. We should be handing the next governor a completely fiscally sound, balanced budget. We are not, no matter what the governor says.
So the governor's office, to push back on that says, look, the structural deficit for this budget on paper right now, of course, we all know things are going to change between now and April and now and June, is about $1 billion. So the structural deficit is less than it was, still there, to your point.
As we sit here today.
But has shrunk.
That is wrong. As we sit here today, it's between $3 and $4 billion. And it's not hard to figure out how that works. If you're going to do, first off, if you look at the surplus that's coming down, it's about $1.5 billion. After you take out the federal money that they dumped into surplus at the end of the year. So we're spending down our surplus at an alarming rate, no matter what they try to say. Then what are you going to do after that? So you've got state of New Jersey is going to cost you an extra $1 billion, maybe $1.5 billion.
But you've said you're not necessarily against state of New Jersey.
I'm talking about, look, I would choose to fund that. But that is part of the structural deficit because it's not funded now, and it's a promise of next year. You immediately get to between $3 and $4 billion of structural deficit without even scratching the surface of what all the other things in this budget and the details that we're going to find within the next several months as we dig into it.
Anything that you right now can stand here and say I can get behind, or that you could see your caucus getting behind?
Oh, certainly. Moving the transit fee to transit, it was completely absconded by this administration last year. Doing that, I fully back that. That has to happen because transit's a mess. When the governor came into office, he said over his dead body, he's going to fix New Jersey Transit. He looks great, I have to say. And New Jersey Transit's on life support. That's a broken promise. That is something we get behind, is moving that money collected from the corporate transit fee to transit is something we could. And again, there's a lot in the budget we could support. There's a lot of responsible things we're doing. Again, fully funding pensions. We're absolutely on board with that. But there's so much, there's billions of dollars It shouldn't be happening at a time when we have a structural deficit like this.
All right, Republican Budget Officer Declan O'Scanlan, good to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks
We'll be catching up with you in the Republican response as well. Senator, good to see you. Democratic Congresswoman Bonnie Watson Coleman, a progressive voice in the party and the first black woman elected to Congress from New Jersey, says her current term will be her last. After more than a decade representing the 12th Congressional District in Central Jersey and nearly 3 decades in public service before that, she's decided not to seek re-election in 2026. Her announcement surprised many, given her continued activism and outspoken presence on some of the nation's most contentious issues. Well, I spoke with her earlier today as the House prepared for another highly watched vote about her decision, her legacy, and the work still ahead. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us. Another busy day on your plate, as they, I'm sure, all have been in the last decade. Why was now the right time to step away?
Thanks for having me. I'm always glad to be with you all. It's been something that I've been thinking about for about 6 months. I think that I've worked hard. I've worked in a space that I found very difficult to work in, with a scandalous administration and a capitulating Congress and a capitulating Supreme Court. And I think it's time to let someone else to take this on. So my family and I have been talking about it. I held the information while we went through a gubernatorial, a very successful gubernatorial, and some other important areas. And as soon as I thought it was a free time to announce, I wanted to announce it to my staff, and I wanted to announce it to any potential candidate, so both staff and candidates could do what they needed to do over a longer enough period of time to be successfully transitioning into their next thing.
I mean, your colleague, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, has also said that she will not seek re-election. 6 terms, nothing to sneeze at by any means, but also by congressional standards, not an eon of time. I mean, a decade by congressional standards is somewhat short. Was there a specific point of frustration, as you say, with this political climate that pushed you here in these last 6 months?
So Congress is hard, period. We've got more rules than we have opportunities to pass legislation. So that, there were frustrations with that. But I am going to tell you, I've never experienced such meanness, such intentional evilness in an administration as I experienced in the Trump second administration. When you couple that with the fact that Congress has abrogated its constitutional responsibility to be a check on that and to be the purse strings of the United States taxpayers' money, and when you put on top of that a Supreme Court that has become politicized and lost its way, it is hard. It is hard to face it every day, knowing that the system is stacked against you. And so there are people like me that will speak out all the time, that will try to use legislation, use other forms of acknowledgments on the floor in resolutions, hook up with folks protesting. But when you have all 3 branches of government not functioning, not authentic, and in violation of their constitutional obligations, you got to say at some point, well, what more can I do? And so I go home at night feeling burdened, sometimes crying, because I can't help make it better. Can't fix somebody's problem. I said, well, maybe it's time for some other people, hopefully sharing some of my same values, to come in and you put their metal to the pedal, so to speak.
Israeli officials this week lifted a nearly 3-month blockade on food, medicine, and other essentials. Today, that aid, including baby food, began trickling in. But the UN's humanitarian chief said it was a, quote, drop in the ocean of what is urgently needed by the roughly 2 million Palestinians in the war-torn Gaza Strip. Sami Shaban is among the Palestinian Americans in New Jersey who've been advocating for an end to the war and for more humanitarian aid. He's the head of the state's Muslim Civic Coalition, but he's also lost at least 40 members of his family killed in Gaza in Israeli airstrikes. He joins me now. Sami, thanks so much for coming back on the show. Let me ask you first about what you've been able to hear from folks on the ground about whether they've been able to gain access to any of the aid that has now made it through the crossing within these last 12 hours or so.
Yeah, we have been in contact with my family over there. Very little aid is getting to anybody. Even at the highest points, you're talking about only a small percentage of people that will actually get what they need. The rest of the people are left to fend for themselves. You're talking about a deprivation in food, in healthcare, an inability to basically perform basic functions in your life because you just can't move. You're just debilitated from, a lack of any human resources that you would need.
Yeah, I know the UN, the Israeli prime minister said that they were looking to focus on the most needy families, but do you have any idea how they're making that discrepancy when I know you have said and many have said it's borderline famine there?
Yeah, I actually would not call it borderline famine. I would call it all-out famine. And it's a complete lack of any water, of any food goods, of anything that would be sustaining life. There is literal starvation. It's to the point that my family cries to us and just says, why don't they just kill us at this point? Like, it's too much. We can't survive. Like, it's the slowest possible death that you can inflict on somebody.
I mean, what do you say to them when you hear that over the phone?
We cry together. We try to make the most light of it. That they're very God-believing people, so they know that God has a plan in all of this, and they know that once their finality meets them, they're looking forward. They believe that their patience will be rewarded, but it's excruciating.